This conference will now be recorded.
Marvelous. Okay, so the point of today is we're not going to spend a lot of time actually creating a big business plan. Business planning is a very, very important course. We usually hold it for at least half a day, maybe even a full day, because it really dives deep into a lot of the numbers. What I have here is a very simple how many phone calls do you need to make to reach your goals kind of system. Now, there are some numbers in here that it's assumed you know. So, for instance, we're looking at this first one here. You know, you've got to pay the bills, you've got to live, you've got to survive, you've got to eat, you've got to pay the mortgage, you've got to have heat, etc., etc. So, a lot of these monthly living expenses, when we look at this spreadsheet here, this is basically you need to know some of these numbers, and you can change any of these because you can see you've got others in here as well. So the idea is that you want to build up a budget for not only your business, but also how does that business then fund your life. So this is where you start basically needing to get some numbers for what you're actually paying out on a monthly basis just to actually survive and to live. So that's the whole point of this. Now, once you start filling in some of these numbers, and what we'll do is I'll make sure that this spreadsheet actually is available to you, and you can go through your bank statement. Even the banks today will actually split out a lot of this stuff for you on a monthly recurring basis. So they even make it a little bit easier for you. But for instance, you need to know how much is your mortgage on a monthly basis. If you've got higher car, lease payments or finance payments on the car, how much is gas? Is it oil? If it's oil, change it to oil. Car maintenance, car insurance. You know, all of these items here are going to be regular expenses that you're going to have to pay. What it does then is it basically says, okay, once you've added that up, and you know, I know my expenses roughly about, I think it's $4,000 a month. So if I look at this one and we'll take me as an example, I'll just put in another $3,000 in here on a monthly basis just to fill this up. So now what it's done is said, okay, making anything less than $53,500 a year is going to cause stress or debt. And that is not something that we want to get into. So what it does then is says, okay, well, that's your basic minimum standard. And of course, that's got to be after taxes, because whether we like it or not, we have to pay taxes. So the point then is it says, well, okay, now let's start looking at some business goals and let's start figuring it out from there. So step 3 is basically saying how much is your targeted income do you actually want to take home? So with this particular example, they're saying that it's $180,000 is your, what's happened now? No, it won't let me click in. Oh, there we go. There's a comment or something here. Oh, over there. There's the comment. Keywords, take home. So there you go. After you have paid property taxes, that's the whole point. So you need to come up with a number in there. Now, what this is going to do is this will actually work out how much gross income you're going to make. And from that, it's going to work backwards and say on the tab down here where it says part 4, how many leads, it's going to work out how many leads you're going to need based on conversion ratios and a round of other stuff to achieve that number. So the question for everybody becomes, what's your take-home target income? And that's the key thing for everybody to really think about. Now, once you have that, it says, well, okay, this is take-home income. So this is after you've paid taxes. So if you decided that, yes, you needed to basically have $100,000, you would, if your taxes is 20%. Now, deciding what your taxes are, the best way to do this is to look at last year's tax return that hopefully everybody filed. Because on there it will say you paid X thousand dollars of taxes. And hopefully it was paid, not you owe us X thousand dollars of taxes. So I know with mine, my business is set up a little bit differently because I incorporated my business 5 years ago. So my effective tax rate from the company is a lot lower. So for me, it's a very different percentage. If you were a salaried employee and if you had $100,000 gross wage, you can expect to have a third of that taken away by personal taxes, other deductions, EI, pension contributions, a whole raft of stuff. So if you have no other idea what to put in this number, my suggestion is to put in 0.3, which is 30%. That would then, with some weird and wonderful formulas that, basically take that $100,000 and divide it by 0.3, you end up saying, well, actually, if you're going to have $100,000 take home and that's what's going in your bank, you need to actually earn $143,000. So that becomes what you would call your gross commission income. And that would actually have to be after expenses of what you've paid as well. So does everybody understand the very easy math on this first page? If you just want to put into the chat comments that, yes, you've got it, and you understand how this first page works, because this is the one that's going to start everything. So this is where you have to type in the chat box or reply back vocally that, yes, you understand. Mona understands. Phyllis, you got it? Good. Phyllis has got it. Was there anybody else? Renee. Oh, it says yes. Good. Okay, so we all get how it basically starts. Now what we have to do, and we'll leave all the numbers in here so that it actually, oh, a spelling mistake. Like, so we can follow this all the way through. So at the moment, we're saying our target taxable income is $143,000. So now we look at part two. And part two is really going to start. I don't know whether the browser's slow here or. Wow, really slow. Today or tomorrow? Oh, you got a little. Oh, that's even better. Wow. Well, this is intriguing. This could be a shutdown browser and start again, is it? Yeah. Not responding. Wow. Okay. What is it doing? Okay. Let's close it down and start again. See, this is what happens when you play on a Windows and not a Mac. Just saying. It's not even shutting down. Close the program. No, we don't want Windows to help. All right, let's try again. No problem, Phyllis. We'll email you the spreadsheet. There's a bigger version of business planning coming soon anyway, so This one was meant to be for people who obviously understand a little bit about their expenses now. So we'll figure it out. Let's see if this works. This is just not happening. Oh, maybe. Yay, we're back. Maybe. Probably. Hopefully. Okay, let's have a look at part 2, GCI. Right. Okay. So, part 2 basically takes you on from part 1 and says, okay, let's bring in some numbers. So, we know our total taxable income has got to be $142,857.14. Now, this is just your taxable income. So, you now need to work this back again to say, well, unfortunately, we have to pay the broker. Keller Williams is going to take a certain split, and it really depends on you personally what split you've agreed with Keller Williams. So some of us are on a 70-30 split with the brokerage, some of us on 80-20, some of us are on 90-10. Just depends that you've actually got to do. So for me, I'm on an 80-20 split. So in that case, I put in the 0.2 to say this is how much the brokerage is going to take from me. This is how much I keep. Now we also know that we have to pay $20,000 as a cap to Keller Williams as well. Oops. So the $20,000 is going to stay the same. So this one here says, let me just get a little bit wider. Oh, you're still again. So this one says this is the total amount paid to your brokerage, and it says, does this amount exceed your cap? If yes, enter 0 for commission split. So we were putting 0 there because I'm not paying $55,000 to brokerage, no offense. But it then says, okay, well, now it's going to take the annual lump sum. So the idea here is for this one is we know that it's $20,000. So now it says, okay, you're going to pay $20,000 to the brokerage. So guess what? If you need $142,000 before tax, well, you're going to need another $20,000 on top of that number because you've got to pay the brokerage. So now we need to actually have $162,000 gross expense. So that's your gross commission income. And don't forget on here, we can also make sure that this is going into our Keller Williams GCI, because that's the whole point of this, is it's going to keep you on track and it's going to keep you honest in terms of your activities on a daily basis. That's what the GCI tracker is all about. Now, unfortunately, we also know we have brokerage, we have business expenses. So we have NSAR fees, we have MLS fees, we have errors and omissions insurance, license renewals, license applications, desk fees, which is basically how much do you pay to Keller Williams on a monthly basis. And we know that as a minimum, we have a $55 a month for that. Now, don't forget here, this is annually, so it'll be 55 times 12. MLS fees and board dues. Now we've all go through every January and every June. We have to renew licenses and NSAR fees and CREA fees and all this kind of stuff. So we know those numbers. You've paid them this year. So those are the numbers that you should put in there for the information in here. Now you can change any of these descriptions in here at all. So for instance, this would be the NSAR annual fee. Then you could also have NSAR monthly fees. Oh, here we go again. Yeah, I don't know whether it's Wi-Fi or whether it's, oh, there we go. So your NSAR monthly fees, I'm pretty sure it's something like $73 a month. So something like that. Then we have CREA fees. We also have emissions. I remember what else. I don't think there is desk fees. So desk fees, we can change that and really call it KW Office. License application, license renewals, error and emissions, education. So we know that there is a regulatory CPE course that we have to go on every year. So what was the last one? Was it like 100, 150 plus tax? So let's put in $200. And you could say that's even, instead of education, you can call that CPE course. Some years they're free, some years they charge you. And then really it's up to you to decide on other things in here. So we know that if you're gonna sell houses, you need to have sign installations. You might need to get some new signs. So the idea with this is you can put basically all of your expenses in here, and you can very easily kind of click on here and say, this works. Oh, we just killed it now. Oh no, there you go. You can insert rows, and you can actually make this column a lot bigger, because the idea here is you're going to come down to a number that says, well, I've got to cover my business expenses. Now what this is doing is this is taking that $4,700 and adding it to your $162,000 to say, well, okay, we're all working backwards here to get from part one that take home of $100,000 in the bank. So because we're working it backwards to say, well, we need to take home $100,000, that's why this is increasing all the time. To say, well, yeah, in your number, you're going to have to pay expenses. So add it back on, and now it's coming up with 167,500 gross commission. So everybody good with that one? Now these expenses here, these are completely flexible. For me, I have an office at Keller Williams, so I'd need to put that in at however many dollars a month it is. I can look at my Keller Williams monthly statement and average those. Say, okay, if it's $400 a month, well, okay, I'm going to put in 400 times 12, and I'll just put the annual number in there. But these are numbers that you've got to make sure you actually know. Too many agents, and this isn't just Keller Williams, this is across the whole of North America, do not know how much money it costs them to run the business. They just think, so long as the commissions are coming in the top level, I'll worry about everything else afterwards. And that's not a way to run a business. Like, we are trying to achieve a plan here that's going to actually make you run a business, make you do all your cold calls, your lead generation, your door knocking, your sphere of influence, your networking, all of that stuff, so that you will actually come back and go, wow, like the whole thing did work, it kept me on track. So you've got to kind of look at your business expenses and be honest in the same way that you've got to be honest with your living expenses here. You've got to be honest with your business expenses here. Now, it's not to say that you have to spend it. It's just to say you have to be honest about it. So, for instance, if you're going to do Facebook advertising, create a budget every month and say this is how much it's going to cost you. Once you know how much it's going to cost you, well, it's up to you if you want to spend it or not, or spend it for 1 month, and if nothing works, decide if you're going to carry on spending it. But don't forget, things like that have a associated lead time with them. So you can't do Facebook ads and get 10 deals today from Facebook ads. It's just not realistic. So make sure that you're budgeting for the expenses. So we're now built up and said we need to get $168,000 gross commission. Part number 3. So we'll look at this. Make this a little bigger. Spreads out. So this is now saying, great, you need to take home a gross commission. So in other words, the money that comes into the brokerage before you get your splits, before you get paid, is 168. Now you have to decide, and this is where business planning is really important, because yes, there's business planning, but you have to make sure you start tracking your actual numbers. You have to start looking at this and saying, okay, on every deal I do, what is my average commission? Now, you could say it's 2.5%. However, look at the actual numbers, and there's some good reports on the Keller Williams MyKW system that will actually show you the commission that you've earned. And from there, you can actually say, okay, here was the sale price or the purchase price. Let's call it the closed price on the deals that I've done. And here's the commissions gross that I earned. Well, guess what? If you earned $50,000 of gross commissions in a year and the listings were $5 million of transaction volume, just do the math that, and that will tell you exactly what your average commission is. If you don't know it, my suggestion would be to basically say 2.2%. Now, the reason that we say 2.2% is some of them are twos, some of the 2.5s. It just depends on what the listing agent has actually done. And that will tell you if the listing agent's decided it, well, you can't, you could, I guess, but it's going to be hard for you as a buying agent to actually be able to figure out what that number could be, or even say, I'm better than that and I want a X number of percentage. So our suggestion is, again, to be honest, you're not going to do every deal at 2.5%. There are going to be some that you will go in at 2%. There might be some that you can even get 3. So 2.2 is a smart number. Now, at the moment, this is formulated just as a decimal point. If we change that to the percentage, then basically it's 2.2. Very simply then, this says if you need $168,000 of gross commission, and every deal you do is going to be at 2.2, you need to do $7.6 million of volume. Now, volume is what did the house sell for? $250,000 house, $500,000 house, etc., etc. Now what we're trying to do is get back into how many transactions are we going to do. So now guess what you also need to know? What's my average sales price for all of the deals I've done? The average in HRM right now is $304,000 for the whole of HRM. Just because I'm a stats geek and I follow it, so I know that it's 304. However, my average is not 304. My average is more like 382, just because I do some higher volume deals, I do some lower volume deals, etc., etc. So you need to kind of know what your average is. But if we said, okay, let's go with the 304, the whole of HRM, then it says, well, okay, to get all of this, you need to do 25 deals in the year. So you can see how this is basically reverse engineering from the I want $100,000 after taxes paying into my bank. That's the whole point. Now we've worked out with a little bit of math and some fun and games, and you deciding to be honest with some of your expenses, I need to do 25 transactions a year. That might be enough for you, depending on this price here. It might be less deals. So for instance, if we said, let's go to $400,000 average, guess what? Now I only need to do 19 transactions. So depending on that average sales price, that will basically decide what your number of transactions is going to be. So we're going to leave this at the moment at 25 deals. So how many people at the moment are going 25 deals? Oh my God, where does it come from? How do I do it? Answer in the chat box. Because don't forget, a lot of this is just about being honest with your business. If you're looking there going, there's no way I can do 25 deals, then you have 2 questions to ask. Number 1, was I realistic with the amount of money I wanted to earn and the expenses associated around that? Number 2 question you need to ask yourself is, why? Why do I think I can't hit 25 deals in a year? So once you've gone through those kind of questions, now we look at part 4, which is, okay, how many transactions, or where am I going to get these leads from? How many buyers? How many sellers? And then from here, you can basically decide to look at your lead sources and everything else. So based on $100,000 after taxes coming into my bank account and the expenses I put in, and the average price and the broker split, the cap, the commissions, the fees I've got to pay, it came out to say 25 transactions is what I need to do. This should really round up. Like, you can't do 25.1 transactions. Maybe it's 25 transactions in a referral. So you should really round up or round down. I would always say, may as well just round up. So our next question becomes, okay, now we need to know how many buyers we're going to do and how many sellers we're going to do. So this one here, and we'll put this in percentages. Don't need decimal points. This one is all about trying to work out how are you going to split between buyers and sellers your 25 transactions. Here, the suggestion is we're going to do 60% sellers and 40% buyers. So when we look at this one, you can see that if you did 60% listings, you would have to have 15 transactions that were the sellers. 40% buyers means you need 10 buyers, and that gets you to your split. Now you can play with these to your heart's content. You know, a lot of agents to start off with. If you don't have a big database of people and you are new to the business, you would probably say, well, do you know what? I'm actually going to be conservative and say I'm going to get 30% sellers, and I'm actually going to go more 70% buyers, because buyers are a lot quicker to convert sometimes than sellers. It's obviously a lot easier skill set to go after buyers than sellers. But just be aware that buyers is a lot more physical labor, sellers are a lot more mental labor. So you have to decide which way you're going to actually form your business. The suggestion really, and especially if you look at the Keller Williams Red Book, is it's leads, listings, leverage. Well, the second L in there is listings. So that gives you an idea as to what we should all be focusing on. So you can play with these numbers, 70-30, 50-50, 60-40, depends what you want to do. Now, in theory, from your listings, you should be getting more buyers anyway. So you need to decide on what that split is. And then here comes the fun part. So the fun part is all about what's your success ratio in terms of converting people, getting to the actual table where, you know, with a buyer or a seller, we managed to get success and we managed to actually close the particular deal. So for instance, if you go on 10 listing appointments and everybody says yes and sign up, your listing appointment success rate is 100%. If you get 9 signs out of 10, it's 90%. So you need to kind of know exactly what you've got to do. But the way that this is trying to work it is to say, okay, let's look at our listings. We need to have 7.5, let's call it 8 listings. Well, if you need 8 listings and you have a 7 out of 10 success rate, you need to go on more listing appointments than 7.5, because you can't just rely on that. Now, yeah, you know, I would suggest as well, sometimes this listing appointment success rate is not just getting the listing, it's also, is it going to get to closing date? So you can kind of look at that and say, yeah, I might take 10 out of 10 listings, but actually only 8 out of 10 will actually get to closing. Well, in that case, put in 80%. And now all of a sudden it says, well, yeah, to get your 7.5 closings. And I'll change all of this as well in the formula to make sure it rounds things up, to make sure that you can't get 7.5 closed transactions. You can either get 7 or you can get 8. You're not selling half a house. And then this one here talks about buyers, same kind of deal. You know, how many buyers are successful? So you might sign up 20 buyers, but for some reason 2 of them drop off and just disappear. Well, in that case, your success rate is 18 out of 20, 90%. So to get your 17 buyers, you actually need to go out with 20 buyers. So that's the very basic summary on how we actually get all of this to work. Now, like I said, we'll send you through the spreadsheet on this, and this one even gives you a pretty nice summary. Change some of the formatting on here because it's either the size of it that needs changing, or we can just try and make everything fit a little better on the page. That's not a good thing to see. Still working on it. Still working on it. Okay, I think I've just killed it again. But can everybody see how you have to decide on how much money you want to come into your bank, and then it just basically builds up your business plan backwards? Has anybody got any questions on some of that and how it all works? It's a pretty simple plan. Like, it's not meant to be in detail. It's not meant to be hard to understand. It's just meant to give you something simple so that you've got an idea when you start 2019, which, by the way, everybody, 2019, your year has started around about a month ago. Because anything you do is not going to result in a paycheck right now, today. So you know that if you're planning for $100,000 next year, some of your conversations today are going to form part of that. So it's one of those questions that, yeah, 2019 started. It actually started more or less middle of October to get through. So this is the very quick summary to say, if you want to take home your $100,000 into the bank, I need to have $163,000 gross commission, which is $7,500 volume, which is 25 transactions, 17 from buyers, 8 from sellers, which means 10 appointments and 20 buyers engaged. And then you even get the opportunity here to say, well, okay, what are the buyer activities I'm going to do? Where are you going to go? What are you going to do to get buyers? Same thing with the sellers. What's your plan? And write down some of the very simple ideas of what do I do to go and find sellers. Same thing with buyers. Where do you go? How do you find them? What are they going to do? The trick then with everything is, unless you're tracking it, you can't measure it. So if you're not measuring your listing conversion ratios of I went on 10 appointments and 7 of them signed, if you're not tracking that, if you're not measuring it, then again, you kind of look at the business model and go, well, how do I know? How can I fill this in to be a lot more accurate? So this was a very simple plan. It wasn't meant to be in detail. It was meant, obviously, to be put in as you have some understanding of some of your numbers, but at the same time, we do have the more detailed business plan session coming up. But it's a long day. You've got to know your numbers. You've got to bring your numbers with you, and at the same time, be honest with those numbers and fill in the plan. Now, a lot of times, for me, I have the tracking schedule that breaks all this down, but I go into the ridiculous and I even look at, well, okay, if I'm doing 18 buyers, where are they coming from? By source. And then I track that as well. So, it's one of those things you have to decide how you're going to run your business and how you want to track it, really. So for the people that are left, which is probably just Mona and Renee, Steve in the office here, any questions on any of this? Because like I said, it's simple. It's not meant to be difficult, but you've got to figure out monthly expenses. You've got to figure out your business expenses. Without those numbers, you don't really have a plan because you're not measuring anything that actually is an expense or a cost to your business. You're just saying, I feel like earning $100,000. Where is it going to come from? Any questions from anybody? Or is everybody gone? I was going to say, Renee, Mona? Oh, Renee's there. Yes, you do. Yes. Oh, there's the key thing. Review this regularly. This isn't like no plan is any good unless you look at the plan on, I would say, a weekly basis. Because if you go off track as well, but you're not measuring yourself against your plan, how are you going to get yourself back on track? So it's one of those things that you've got to do it. Well, kind of your big plan is once a year, but then you should be tracking against that big plan and decide exactly what you're going to do. So who have we got? So Mona, Renee, Karen, and I'm not sure who the other person is. Carol Dill family. I'll tidy this up to make it a little bit better because I don't like the idea of the point one of a listing. I think that's ridiculous. So I'll round them all up and then we'll send this across to you and you can start filling in these numbers as a very simple sheet to keep you on track, because unless you're on track, it's like everything. If you're not on track, how do you know? And if you know that you're not on track, how are you going to figure it out to go back? Your source of buyers or sellers. So that brings us into the next question. Do you know by category where your buyers and sellers are coming from? So are they coming from your sphere of influence? Are they coming from sphere of influence but referrals? So in other words, sphere of influence is I did a transaction with someone who's in my sphere of influence and know, likes, and trusts me. That's what a sphere of influence is, the people who know, like, and trust you. But they could also be a sphere of influence referral. So for instance, Bob is a good friend of mine, and Bob sent over one of his friends, Joe, who I don't know from Adam. Well, that's a sphere of influence referral if Joe does the deal. But you should also look at, say, well, okay, maybe I got some of my leads through Facebook. Maybe I got them through social media. Maybe I got some YouTube leads. Maybe I did some geographical farming. Maybe I did some door knocking. Maybe I did for sale by owners. Maybe I did expireds. Yes, you can do expireds. Just be very careful how you do expireds. Lots of different sources. You just have to flag them. So that's why, when it says on here how many leads, or the summary rather, I would be looking at putting in here some of the sources of where I'm going to go, because you don't want to have a lot of sources because you're just going to be what we call spray and pray. If you really focus on like 5 to 6 sources of buyers and 5 to 6 sources of sellers, then you are focused. You're not going after everything. You're still going to get the onesie twosie deals that just kind of turn up where, no, you weren't going after agent referrals, but somebody gave you a referral from someone moving here from Ontario. But it's not in your plan. It's always nice to have, but it's not something you're focused on going after. So that was the other thing I'd say, is decide on where your deals are coming from, because that gives you focus on where you spend your time, effort, and money. So there we go. Nice, simple, and even like it's called a success plan, because it's just got to keep you on track. So as long as everybody's good and there's no other questions, I'll get this made up a little bit nicer and we'll send it over to Erin so she can actually then send it out and hopefully keep everybody on track. Track your numbers. Use the Keller Williams GCI tracker, because at least that's in there, and I'm sure with everything technology and Keller Williams, that will start actually showing you some of your conversions so that you can then make this a lot more, just pull the numbers from the system next year so that you're not guessing on some of that stuff. But yeah, if nobody has any other questions, then we are done and I shall press stop. No questions? Silence is taken as acceptance. Perfect. Okay, thanks so much for your time, everybody, and you watch out for that spreadsheet coming through.